even with the disparity in messaging coming from Sony and Microsoft's next generation, there is one thing we don't know about either console: price. From Zarmenakon at PlayStation Lifestyle, Microsoft can undercut PS5 price according to analysts. So after Microsoft's first Xbox 2020 event, Geoff Keighley got Michael Pachter, who's the analyst for Wedbush, and Peter Moore, who's it's a long list here of titles. He's the former president of Sega of America, the former VP of Microsoft's Interactive Entertainment Division for Xbox and Xbox 360, and he's the former head of EA Sports, so he knows some shit. And Geoff Keighley got those two people, Michael Pachter and Peter Moore, to talk about Xbox Next Generation plans after seeing this event. Part of the discussion focused on the Series X pricing. Michael Pachter seems certain Microsoft wants Sony to announce price first, allowing Series X to severely undercut PS5's price, potentially by $100, which could theoretically mean Series X will cost $400. And he quoted $400. Now, Peter Moore, who has a lot of experience as a CEO for video game companies, including making hardware, just followed suit with that line of thinking, pointing out that whichever console sells 10 million units first usually wins the generation. Taking a hit on price for the first 12 to 18 months would only be a short-term loss compared to the fortunes that come with being the best-selling console. Chad, we've discussed rumors of PS5's kind of 500 to 550 price point. Does this Xbox Series X price seem even possible given its specs? Would Microsoft take a huge loss on their box?
I have two thoughts about this. The first thought is, and I always come back to this quote, the quote from Phil Spencer saying, with the PS4, Xbox One generation, the PlayStation beat us on power and price, and we won't let either of those two things happen again this time. So obviously, all the specs are out for both consoles. Xbox is more powerful in a lot of different areas than the PlayStation 5 will be. But then the price is the next part of it. And the further along in the year we get, and the further along in the press cycle, the less I'm convinced that there will be a second Xbox coming out this fall. There's always the rumor of Lockhart and Anaconda. One powerful version, one kind of cheaper version. And yeah, the further we get along, the more information we find out, like the optimized for Series X badge that goes on things. Like that, releasing that badge at the same time as another console that doesn't get that badge on it, it could be kind of confusing to the consumers.
Yeah.
And if that's not a possibility, again, I'm not sold on that not being a possibility, but I'm less positive on it than I was before.
It's so hard to know. I've been going back and forth myself on that. Anyway.
So if that's not a possibility, or if that's not going to happen, then by Phil Spencer's own quote, like, this has got to be the case. $400 is, if the console costs $500 or close to it, like it's definitely been shown from all the parts and things like that to cost, and they take $100 loss, I feel like they can't go any cheaper on that without being destroyed. So yeah, $400, PS5, I really think is going to cost more. We've talked about this, the hard drive itself just going to be driving up that cost a lot. But the second thing about this is something that I also forgot. So you talk a second, I'll remember it.
Yeah, so one of the things that Pachter pointed out in the video, it's about a half hour long, but it's a really interesting listen. They don't really talk about the announcements in the event. They just talk about like the consoles generally. And Michael Pachter makes this really good point that Microsoft has this insane market value where I don't know where it's at currently right now, but they passed $1 trillion, like, you know, within the past year. Like, they're huge. It doesn't mean they have $1 trillion on hand, but it means they got a lot of money backing them. Sony as a whole company, not just PlayStation, Sony as a whole, their market cap is like 70 to 80 billion. So like Microsoft is just massive in comparison. They can take hundreds of dollar hit on their box to get to that 10 million that Peter Moore had mentioned. Now that 10 million isn't like a hard fast rule. There are definitely situations where like Xbox 360 got to 10 million first, but I mean, depending on how you analyze that generation, it's either a mixed bag or Sony came out on top in the end. So like it's not a definitive like you have to 10 million first, but I think there's a lot of truth to that statement. And I think that's more important to Microsoft because if they can get that install base and they take a loss by getting that install base, they will make it up on their services. They'll make it up on Game Pass. They'll make it up on Xbox Live. They'll make it up on like all these other service avenues that Sony, they have PlayStation Now, but I don't think they're hitting the ground running in the same way that Microsoft was able to. And hitting the ground running is a poor term here. Like, I don't know if hitting the ground running delayed by 7 years is really a thing. But yeah, I think that Microsoft has the flexibility that Sony doesn't. Microsoft doesn't rely on Xbox to make money for the rest of the company, as opposed to Sony, who really does rely on PlayStation to bring in a lot of money into Sony as a company itself.
Right. There have been so many
Whereas
financial reports
Microsoft's-
where like PlayStation was the only wing of Sony that made money this quarter.
Yeah, exactly. Their smartphones don't do super well in comparison to other smartphones, and they just haven't really gotten as big as PlayStation's gotten. Like, that's their big marquee product. They can't take a risk like that. And I think it's going to look really bad for Sony if this is true, where they come out at $500 and Microsoft undercuts them by $100 at $400. And even though they have that really fancy SSD that's really nice and obviously will have huge improvements for game design and all sorts of other advancements we just really can't think of yet or imagine yet, Microsoft's going to have really good looking games, and they're going to be able to show off much more easily how their console is more powerful in an advertisement than how, and we'll talk about this later on when we talk about the Xbox event, they'll have an easier time showing off the processing power of the Series X than Sony will have showing off the SSD. Yeah. And it's really, that's what I have to say.
I remember what my second thing was. You brought up services, and one of the things I wanted to kind of relate this to is Game Pass, and how obviously the value of Game Pass is incredible, and no one paying the $15 a month for Game Pass Ultimate or $9.99 for regular Game Pass, or so often $1 a month for Game Pass if you get it on deals like I do all the time. Obviously, that's not the same as paying $60 for every single one of the games that's featured on there. But somehow, they aren't losing money on Game Pass. Like, they're making money, and they've come out and said, yeah, this is actually, like, this is not something that we plan to offer at a lower price for now and then in the future turn it into a profit machine. Like, it's making money. So the $400, like taking $100 hit on each of these consoles, they have some kind of plan, some way that they're the magic behind licensing, the magic behind their cut of every single game that's sold, of driving all of these new customers to these other games, whether it's via Game Pass or buying them a la carte. Like, they're going to make that money back for sure. And if that's the difference between them making money from 30 million customers versus 110 million customers, like, yeah, it's worth making that investment, taking that loss up front in order to make that back.
Absolutely. Another thing on top of that too, Xbox All Access. Like, if they're at $400, they're already undercutting the PS5 on price, but then you also include Xbox All Access as another easy barrier
That's
to
their subscription
get in.
plan, paying like $30 a month or whatever for it.
Like, holy shit. That's like, this should, the Xbox All Access alone should worry Sony, but $400 on top of everything else, like, it's going to be really interesting to see this play out if that is the case. And I think $400 is a little low. I don't think they have to go quite that low. I think they could undercut by like $50 to $450. That would work, or even matching the price, but saying, hey, it comes with a year of Game Pass. Like, doing something like that, like, that would be enough as well. But I think it was Phil Spencer saying that Satya Nadella gave Phil Spencer the blank check of just like, whatever you need us to do, like, we'll do it. We're fully behind you. So, yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see it play out. Another part I actually forgot to put in the note here that was in the full video, not in the article that Zermenicon wrote, is that Michael Pachter's like, Microsoft will keep waiting. They'll just keep waiting until Sony announces their price. He's like, they could wait until fall if they wanted to. And I'm like, I don't know if I'd go that far. I don't know if I'd go as far as say, like, in October we'll finally hear the price of these consoles. Maybe I'll eat my words there. Who knows? But he seems very convinced, and I think he's right, that Microsoft will wait as long as they need to let Sony announce the price
Which
first.
is kind of troubling, because we've seen from a lot of reports that that's what Sony is going back and forth on, and they're really struggling with, is figuring out the price of this thing and how it compares to Microsoft.
And one of the things that we've seen just from the rumors is that they're wondering if they want to take a loss on the console or make a profit. And from the rumors we know about, the $500 to $550 would be profitable for them. But if they decide to take a hit and go for $400 instead, that's probably the move to make right now. I think it's worth them taking that hit and then bolstering their own services to help make money that way. Because if they lose a large install base to Microsoft, that's really problematic for them. and it would be hard to recover, considering that's Sony's bread and butter right now.
But would it matter if the Xbox doesn't have any good games on it? Dun dun dun!